Rebecca Jernigan, your tour guide into discoveries, coming to you live from the heart of America to around the globe via the World Wide Web, satellite, and podcast. Let's journey together into the realms of the known to the unknown in search of enlightenment, knowledge, and truth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet Earth. This is your host, Rebecca Jernigan, and you are listening to Journeys with Rebecca right here on wolfspiritradio.com and also Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com Studio B. Please do remember that both stations, Wolf Spirit Radio and Freedom Slips, are totally listener supported. So please, any donations really do make a difference. It allows the shows, the host, and their guests to continue to provide the best and latest information, and of course it's not mainstream. And please don't forget to visit my website, that's journeyswithrebecca.com. While you're there, sign up for Twitter, check out the archives, the upcoming guests and topics, as well as any classes or workshops, as well as setting up an appointment with your session for me. And the newsletter is always free, and it is on the left-hand side of every page on journeyswithrebecca.com. Tonight I have an absolutely fabulous show. The topic is Love is the Power. One man's journey to heal the heart of humanity. And my guest is Robert O. Williams. He's the inventor of the quantum code technology. He's an expert in the field, in the study of subtle engineering. I'll get it out here in just a minute. Is an expert in the study of subtle energy engineering and its effect on physical systems. His research has provided scientific breakthroughs in field-based technologies, consciousness, and human potential. In addition to that, Robert has also enjoyed success as a musician and an educator. He has taught music at the university level. He has recorded and performed with such artists such as the Beach Boys, Paul Horn, and Charles Lloyd. In 1978, after a decade in the music industry, he served as a general manager for Love Songs Production, Inc., a motion picture production company owned by Michael Love of the Beach Boys. The direction of Robert's life and career changed in 1979 when he had a near-death experience. From then on, he devoted all of his time and energy towards researching consciousness and subtle energy physics. He has worked on research projects with prominent scientists including Professor William Tiller, Professor Beverly Rubik, Professor Rustam Roy, and Professor Stuart Krasner. His research was published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine and the Journal of Subtle Energies and Energy Medicine, and he was also chosen to speak at the very first Living the Field conference in London, England on field-based technologies by author Lynn McTaggart. And I would like to take this time now to let everyone know that I'm sure you will have questions for our guest tonight. So please do remember to place any of those questions you have in the chat in all caps. We'll get to those questions as we go through, but right now I'd like to welcome my guest to the show, Robert Williams. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Rebecca, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so grateful for you to be here. I have to tell you, this is just really going to be a fabulous show. One of the things that I want to share with people is that we have a lot of special things to share with them tonight. You have some, I guess you would say some special things that you've been doing, and I've actually got it copied so I can paste it into the chat room in regards to some apps and stuff, and we're going to get into all of that. But I'd like to get in started. Robert, first of all, we gave you that introduction. It's really read off the back cover of your book, which I did have the opportunity to read. And I will tell you, it was a very moving story. There was a lot of things through there that just it I kind of emulated some of those experiences that you had. You wrote them very succinctly. Your book is fabulous. The information about what it is that you're doing here in the book is, it's just fabulous. And I can't wait for you to talk about, also the technique, the quantum code, technology, QCT, later on. But first I'd like maybe for you, Robert, to start out, with some of your earlier experiences, because they were very cool. I love your little dude, man. He was great.
Oh, my little dude. Yes.
Yeah, your little dude. I thought of him.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you. You're very kind. And like I said before, it's a privilege to be on your show, and I can feel your listeners and the community that you've developed. It's very, very critical at this time of Earth, and I don't want to forget about that. I want to come back to speaking directly to each person that's listening now in the community and the collective consciousness that is available right here, because we're together. You're listening to me at this moment, but that doesn't mean that we're separate, and indeed actually is just one part of this phenomenon that's happening on the planet holistically. So, but let's go ahead and go back to that dude you talked about, and I talked about in my book. I grew up as a very unusual boy, and I knew it after a few years. I saw things that other people either did not see or didn't admit to seeing. I saw auras all the time around everyone. I saw spirits in the backyard, or little beings around the plants and the trees. And from my earliest memory, there was one being in particular that would show up in the backyard, and then later in different places around the neighborhood when I was there. His name was Jing, and he was more real in a sense. The other things that I had seen were like spinning little things. I didn't understand them. I didn't even think about them. I just was something I was seeing. But this one particular being was very clear that he wanted me to pay attention to certain things while I was growing up, from day to day in the backyard. And my mom had a garden out there. So it was just Jing, little Bobby, and the nature spirits, and we learned a lot of things. So he would actually take me around and show me, for instance, there were snails that were crawling around, and he would point out and literally with his kind of translucent body have me pay attention to how the snail was crawling around and pointing to the shell, which years later, that ratio of which a snail's shell develops is actually called the golden mean ratio. It's found everywhere in nature, in our own DNA, in all kinds of different structures that are natural. It's the phi ratio. We can get into that detail, but at that point in my life, he was just having me notice the consistency in, for instance, the snails, and then how the flowers would blossom, and he pointed out the similarities, and he also was just a playful buddy, a dude, like you say. He would dance with me and spin me around. He left when I became a young adolescent. He showed up one morning and just said, "I have to go." And I was really beside myself. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You're the only friend I really felt like I have. He says, "Well, it's just not the law. I can't continue on with this kind of relationship." And that was the last I ever saw of him. And by the way, for any of your listeners who are wondering about such phenomenon, first of all, I do believe that there are, and I'm absolutely convinced there are subtle realities that are not quickly available to our conventional five senses. At the same time, I'm not invested in convincing anybody of what I grew up seeing or what I see now with auras and so forth. That's not really the point. The point is that there is a change happening in consciousness, and we can talk about that. But back to my dude, he left when I was a young boy, and then my life changed a bit at that point.
Are you still there with me, Robert?
I am. I just wanted to give you a chance because I can just go on and
great.
blab away.
No. Well, I just never know. This Skype technology isn't all it's cracked up to be, right? Well, he was, and I have to tell you that, as it's kind of stated, there's correlation there, but as I was reading your book and he was pointing out to you these things for you to, to pay attention to. And, I've had some similar experiences. Obviously they're not been identical, but they've been similar. And that was the thing that I was taught through this other unseen world to most people, is with, the guides and the beings that were there. Is pay attention to what isn't being said. Pay attention to what your eyes really can't see. Pay attention to how you feel. It was learning to tune into the more, as you called it, the subtleness of it. And in that subtlety is such a magnitude, that it almost overshadows what we call this physical reality that we're in. That subtleness carries a lot of, just so much information in it that it's almost inconceivable to explain what you can sense in just a few moments. The words are inadequate to describe the levels and the depth and the understanding, because it's a lot of it for me is conceptual. For you've kind of went past and beyond that into the whole physics behind it, but we'll get into that. I kind of wanted you to explain your book a little bit and some of the things that you went through, because you had near-death experiences, all these things, because this is what I think you were designed to do, was you had to go through these things in order to come out the other side, so to speak, of this reality that you exist in. And wow, it's just amazing. Your journey, Robert, is just amazing to me. Truly, it is.
We all have a design. Every human being, every form of life, everything, whether it's considered alive or not, has a design, has a location in the universal unfoldment of higher potential. And whether it's dramatic or not, it is equally important. It's equally of value. So I say that because a lot of my stories are very dramatic and near death, and the heart stopped, the breath stopped. So that's my particular location in the universe that's referencing those kind of events. But the awakening that happened after those events has never left me with other thoughts than we are one thing with many different faces and many different bodies. The essence of life, the essence of consciousness is a unified field. And when I began to go in and out of different dimensions, as you have, I'm sure, as well, and many of your listeners, we go into these different dimensions, we see actually more clearly that there is a golden rule, if you will. There is and it really is gold, by the way. That's where that term came from. When somebody is loving somebody else unconditionally, there's a gold aura that shows itself around the heart, or at least that's what I saw. And it doesn't matter who you are or what the circumstances are, if there is that connection of unconditional love, there's a gold radiance, and it's a very strong and the most important field of energy on the planet right now. And my best example is how each mother on this planet has served her child. I'm sure there is exceptions, and I'm sure there's, tragedies in motherhood, but the program in each mother, in each parent even, is one of unconditional love. So I'm a father, and I have a daughter, and I remember those early moments after the birth of our daughter, and then the months, the hours, and years afterwards, and she's now going to be 12 next month. But it was such an amazing, since I was able to see a little bit more than my neighbors were, I was able to see that tremendous power of a mother's love with my own daughter. And when my daughter cried, my wife, the mother of my daughter, just responded without condition. You know, it's obvious. We don't think, the mothers don't think, mothers out there, you never thought, what am I going to get out of this deal? You know, here's this child, you know, I mean, maybe this child won't like me when I'm older. Maybe we're going to have different political opinions. I mean, what's in it for me? You know, we don't even have those thoughts. It's impossible, because unconditional love is just that. There's no conditions. The love is free and it is limitless. So that's a blueprint. Eventually, there will be an awakening to that blueprint of the value of love, the value of that state of love, unconditional love. And that awakening will change things quite suddenly on the planet. And there's a physical component to that phenomenon that I can talk about if you want. But growing up, or let's see, where did we, maybe I might have rambled. I'm talking about growing up, our different stories, our location. Oh yeah, the design. We are designed to love. And love takes many forms, but ultimately love becomes a state of consciousness, a state of reality. And there's been no other word that I could find to capture that phenomenon where we do know that we're connected, and to think of doing something cruel or to think of doing something hurtful or harmful to somebody else will be impossible at that state of consciousness. It is now even. It is now for most of us. I'm sure, I bet you every one of your viewers, or your listeners, nobody could pay them enough money to go out and be cruel to somebody else. Impossible. This community that you've garnered and nourished, the journeys that you've been on together, and just the community, you're based in Kansas City, it's attracted the consciousness that will not do things that it knows to be wrong. And in fact, at some point, you don't even have the thought. You can't even have the thought of doing something hurtful. Now that's called higher potential consciousness. Unfortunately, we know that there's somebody right here on the planet Earth that's being cruel to somebody, that's maybe killing somebody. Those things are still happening because the consciousness hasn't risen to the point where those thoughts are either just ignored or the thoughts don't even enter the system. But we're in this bridge. We're in this transition. That's why it's important that you keep doing what you're doing, and I do my best as well, and each one of your listeners as well.
I couldn't agree with you more with that statement, Robert. And I had to giggle a little bit because, when you said mothers don't, when they're getting ready to have a child, they don't think, well, what's in it for me? I had three children, and it was a foreign thought. I thought, well, that's kind of funny. I would never have thought about that. No, that didn't enter.
There's the blueprint.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Eventually,
and
eventually we don't even think, what's in it for me when we meet anybody new. Because our consciousness has provided our basic survival requirements. And that's certainly not the case for everyone right now. And so there's a condition, part of the symptom of the bridge we're on. And then there are people that will hurt us if we're not careful and hurt our children, God forbid. So we have to be alert. We have to be conscious of the other like that. But still, when the heart is at a certain place, there's an appropriate relationship, but it's based truly in love. It's based in what is best for that other person. If that other person is going to steal food that we need or harm us, then we say no and we stop and we do something appropriately. That's also an act of love in that instance.
Yes, I agree. And I have actually tried to share that with a lot of people through my years as well. I mean, like you and like everybody else is listening, when we're first, we're growing up in this world, we don't have the answers. We get the answers as we go through, and certainly we continually, hopefully, become wiser and better people than what we were when we first started out, because we're listening to whatever information is being given to us, that subtlety, that wisdom, that those other realms, that all connectedness. And I feel this way, Robert. You're talking about love is really the only power, and it is. And I have to tell you, my first experience with an other dimensional being, she appeared to me as like a fairy creature. And then one day she turned this absolutely beautiful golden color, and she introduced me to somebody that I called the elder at that time. Now, mind you, I'm 4 years old. I don't really understand the term elder, but that's what I thought of him as. And he started to speak to me. And when I did, she bowed to me and left, and I never seen her again until I was in my 20s. And from this point on, I have not seen her since I have been in my 20s. So she has not returned to me, and I always knew it was because she was always there, sort of like in the background. And if something untoward should happen, whatever that could be, and I'm not imagining that for sure, I think she would probably show up again, but she has not done so. But I really feel as I look back on it, even though I missed her because she was my Tea Party friend, right? I didn't have sisters, so she was my little buddy, and then she went away, and then there was this, this beautiful other man, and he was there, and he was gorgeous and everything and lovely, but he didn't like tea parties too well. He wouldn't sit in my closet with me and drink my imaginary tea. So, but in any case, we've all had those experiences, these imaginary friends that other people think are imaginary. And it's so refreshing after all these years, and recently in the last 10 years specifically, so many people have come forward and said, well, I used to have them too, but I come to now know that they aren't imaginary at all. Just because other people can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. So this power of love that you talk about is truly it. I mean, I felt such love and gratitude for those first experiences. And of course they've continued. And that golden color, I just remember that beautiful golden color. It was like a gold ring color, like a band of gold, and a gold band, like a wedding ring would be or something. That's when she came to me, and she seemed to grow as I grew. So she was young when I was young, and when I was in my 20s, she looked like somebody that was in her 20s. So it's an amazing thing. And you talk about the fact that you got to see chakras and auras. I mean, you got to see auras, and you got to see all these beautiful nature spirits, and that was kind of part of who you were. Are you still able to see those things in the same way, or has that changed since you've gotten such depth of information? We're going to get into that, but I kind of want to lay a little bit of a groundwork here for people.
Sure, I still see all those things. It's like any area of life, we need to practice and become more proficient at whatever area of life we're pursuing. So in the beginning of part of my life, I just saw those things, did not understand them. I understood Jing because he led me around and pointed at snails and stuff, but I didn't understand the aura. And I didn't understand all the different things I was seeing. I studied with another clairvoyant, and there's books about it. So these days, the clairvoyance is a secondary, you could say, a peripheral sense that if there's a purpose for it, if it's needed, if there's some relevance to whatever is going on the subtle level, then I'll certainly pay attention. But there is a odd paradox now that I'm 63 years old, is that now it is more about embodying, being more physical, allowing the physiology and my physical conjunction, or my mind and my body and the emotions and all those things that are mortal but are here as me, as Robert Williams, this one little human in the scheme of things. It is bringing more of that light, that infinity that I did experience in many different ways into the body, into all my chakras and exploring how that transfiguration will maximize itself while I'm still alive. So I'm, the clairvoyance, now I'm like, paying attention to what I eat and, you know, you know, and what I'm doing and if I'm exercising, that kind of thing. It's kind of turned a 180, this whole experience of life. But I still have those memories and I still have the ability, yes, to see clairvoyantly.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you know, you've went through an awful lot. Of course, you know, you went through those near-death experiences, and I was reading that in the book, and how transformative they ended up being. Of course, when you're going through them, the experience was, you know, beyond traumatic, for sure, and dramatic at the same time. But yet, it was enough to let you understand. And, oh, for heaven's sakes, they really, you know, for you, it just was in a real, intense place they wanted you to get it, in other words, you know, and
yeah.
Get it, you did. And, you know, that was usually a transformative event and I've had a lot of people on the show. I myself have had one of those, near-death experiences. That's just something that's just beyond really description for people because they think that you should be able to fix it. And it's something that's way beyond a physical thing. Maybe you could speak to that for a few moments.
I'd love to because there was a huge lesson in that time of my life. And let me just start by saying that if we're in pain, our first impulse is to try to do something to get out of the pain. That's an appropriate impulse. If our child is crying, our first impulse is to hold the child, to bring it love or bring it nourishment or whatever it needs so that the cries turn into laughter or peace. We have that same reaction when we're in pain. If our head hurts, our knee hurts, whatever, and that's an appropriate phase. In my case, and maybe in some of your listeners, if the pain doesn't go away and we keep trying to do something to get the pain to go away, not that those desires are inappropriate, but at a certain point, they actually interfere with the healing process. Only at a certain phase. I'm not saying for anybody who's sick or anybody who's in pain to just not do anything, but for me, and for many of us, we've experienced that place where we can no longer effort our way out of pain. We can't seem to find the remedy or the medicine or the way. It is in those events, in those realities, and that's our own relationship with self. We know when we're there. We know that we've given it all we can on the level of our intellect, on the level of those who are trying to help us, on the level of our own common sense, and it's still not healing, or it's still not alleviating in terms of intensity of pain. It's in those moments where there are like hidden doors, and I'm going to talk about them. So if we begin to surrender and allow that circumstance unconditional love, that means we're not resisting the pain anymore in that particular circumstance. We're not resisting the discomfort. We're not resisting the tragedy. We're not resisting horror or darkness or all those things that we generally do resist. As we are able to surrender into that condition, then what will generally happen is that the pain will increase at first. It's like a test. Or the discomfort or the despair or the horror will increase at first. And then we keep surrendering. We keep surrendering. We keep letting ourselves become more than we thought we were. And that's the position in our phase of development, which does require the leap of faith. So when I was at that point where no matter what I did wasn't helping, it could have been because I was just stubborn. The turning to the light was not my first choice. The surrendering into the moment was not my first choice. It was the choice out of many years of struggle. And when I finally surrendered into the moment, then or if we do that, we can talk in the present moment, or for any of us identifying discomfort, identifying a place where we resist. If we actually love into that, which is identifying it first, there it is. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it in my emotions. And I'm going to allow that to have its way. If it's pain, I'm going to just allow that. That's a position of consciousness that opens a doorway, not immediately, but eventually it opens a doorway for miracles. It opens a doorway for that which is non-logical, non-analytical. It doesn't make any sense at all to our intellects and to others' intellect. It just happens. And the surrender, if it is truly complete, you are willing, and I say this with all compassion to those who are struggling, but the surrender, if complete, you are actually willing to die at that point. And once that willingness at that particular point in our lives is alive with love, then the angels show up because they're not allowed to enter a vibration of resistance. They're not allowed to enter a vibration of effort or agenda even. And I'm talking about the special angels, and some of these secrets of the universe. So I did go through those doorways, and I was able to find those doorways, those portholes that opened up not into complete death or not into demolishing all that I was without anything new. It was a transformation of awareness, and the awareness was not therefore limited to my body or contracted around the pain. And that's what I had to go through to understand this love at this time of Earth and its availability to all of us. So I think I'm speaking to enough of those in your audience, and you particularly, Rebecca. We can not only intuit, we can actually relate to those times of life when we've surrendered completely, and which is the same thing as love. If back to the mother of my wife, when our daughter was crying, she is holding that child without condition. She is surrendered into offering her whole self, even if she doesn't know what the child needs. It is just that openness of love. And often that's all the baby needed. And often that's all that our wounds need at that moment. It's all that our cancers need, or our disease, or the pathologies. It is the power of love. And we've seen it enough. These spontaneous healings, these miracles. And in my own case, the doctors had given me 6 months to live. And I'm here talking to you on your radio show. So something else happened, something else. And that was this experience of light, love, and consciousness that these days are more available to each and every human being than ever before.
Let's talk about that. First of all, I want to make a couple statements here, is that, over the past, several years, there's been a lot of people who have talked about a wave coming, entering, onto this earth and into this earth that literally changes humanity. And I've thought about this. I've thought about this and thought about this, and then I was reading your book, and I was, and this talks about your heart project now, your Heal the World project. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But, and I thought about that, and you said in your book about if just 1% if just 1% of humanity becomes awakened or enlightened, which just means being love, being in the love, that it can make miracles happen. And I thought about that statement, and I connected it myself personally to this wave that we all, something is like you can just feel something coming forward. You just don't know what it is yet. You don't know exactly how it's going to show up or how you're going to feel when it does show up, but you just know it's going to happen. You just can feel it.
Yeah.
And I put those two things together. I may be way off base, but that's what that feels like to me.
I don't think you're off base at all. We can all feel it. And also, I did the technical research on it. And after let's take an example that we all can relate to. A plant has its different phases of expression. Let's take a rose plant. So it starts out the seed, and as human beings, there's been enough people on the planet that have watched how a seed goes into the earth, that we teach it in high school, right? Or even earlier. So we know there's a phase of that rose that is the seed. And then something magical, something very mysterious says, no more seed, no more time for the seed. And something creates a force that breaks open the seed. And the seed, which was ordered and very stable, had its own reality, now it gets crumbled. Now it gets broken away. And then the sprout comes out. And you can see all these different phases. There are phases of long periods of stability and continuum of paradigm or exchanges of energy. So let's take the plant. Let's keep going with that, because we've all heard of photosynthesis. So the seed then has a green. Now it's poked out now it's a plant growing with a stem, right? And it turns green. The green frequency takes in carbon dioxide and gives out oxygen. We all heard about this. That's how we keep oxygen. You know, this wonderful exchange between the plants and the trees and animals and humans that are breathing oxygen, their waste product, and we're giving away carbon dioxide, which is their nourishment. So it's a wonderful example of how we can exchange energy in appropriate systems. So the plant then goes through, let's go back to, we're imagining this green seed, and then that's a state of order. Then there's an increase of chaotic or an increase of disorder, chaos. What's happening? It's because now the leaf is coming out of the stem. And so then that leaf goes through its magical expression, which is quite different than the seed, quite different than the sprout, quite different than the stem. Now, preceding the actual flowering of the rose is the greatest amount of disorder. I'm not making this up. If you look at it under a microscope, right before that bud happens on the rose bush, the cells are going crazy. Some of them are going down the side of the stem. They're not, it's just disorder like you've never seen on this plant before. And if you didn't know that this was just a natural sequence of the life of this plant, you would think that, oh my God, this plant is in big trouble. It looks like it's going to die, because let's say you never knew that there was going to be a rose on the other end. But we've seen the roses, so that disorder it's not interfered with by our farmers and our gardeners. We know the bud is going to transform into this beautiful flower. So when the blossoming happens, the paradigm shifts. The actual flower, still not an analogy, still the real thing, is no longer giving off oxygen and taking in carbon dioxide. The flower has a whole new function and a whole new relationship with the universe. And the bees come and So now let's look at humanity. We've gone through these phases. We've gone through the development of all the chakras to a certain degree, particularly in the lower three chakras, or in the meanness, or in the tribal requirement to make sure there's enough food and there's enough shelter for our little tribe. And in the olden days, there were threats to that shelter and animals that would come up, and we had to learn how to defend ourselves and all those wonderful things that allowed humanity to keep growing. There's different phases of our personality that we've explored, different phases of our families and communities. Now, as was built into the seed or the blossoming of the rose, it is also built into every molecule of our being. These are fields of information that are built into you, Rebecca, me, Robert, and everyone listening, and every living thing on the planet. It's time now. The season has come for the blossoming of humanity. It was written about in the ancient Rig Vedas. It was written about I found it in all the different religious texts. It's hidden in there, but I actually found those writings. The Cherokees, the different Indian tribes, they talk about a wave of energy, like you talked about, a wave of awakening. It's like Gabriel blowing his horn, or Krishna, the chariot's coming, and there's all these analogies of a new consciousness approaching humanity. And because I was blessed with having these near-death experiences, I was able to see these symbols or these geometries, these information fields that have been latent, have been passive, have just been in the, not even accessible by most humans until now. It's like, why would the seed need to know all about the blossoming rose? It hasn't even sprouted yet. So it would be inappropriate for those informational fields to be active at the level of the seed. They become active when it's time for the blossoming. So it is time for the blossoming. The rate of disorder in all the different systems of humanity is increasing. So we can look at the economic systems, the political systems, the educational system, not in every single instance, but overall, there's a shaking up. There's a new energy that is attempting to create a transformation, and will create a transformation, whether we want to or not, into this higher state of order, into this higher consciousness. And by the way, those are the codes that I talk about in the book, the 108 codes. Codes is synonymous with mandalas, synonymous with frequencies. We didn't use those words for different reasons. We came up with codes trying to figure out how to describe these information fields. But that is what I talked about in the book too, and what is probably the most exciting thing about being alive right now, Rebecca, is that each of us are able to, with our attention, resonate with the greater potential of our very selves. We begin to resonate, and this is the difference between us and the rose plant, is that humans have been given this gift of freedom, this gift of free will to choose where our attention goes. So right now, most of us have our attention in our ears or in our brains or in our nervous system, however you want to access what these acoustic vibrations on your eardrum, and you can understand my language, and most of our awareness is there somehow. Now, we wanted to, we could put our awareness right on our knees, right? At the same time, we can put our awareness on our feet. We can put our awareness on our hearts. This is a choice that we as humans have. It's not predestined. It's predestined that we have that choice, but it's not, the choice is not made for us. So I want to take a pause there because I've given a lot of information, but it is an exciting time. The rose cannot participate in its own individual blossoming. That's pre-programmed, and it's a wonderful thing. Humans have been given this co-creative gift, and that's part of this planet. That is why this planet was created, in my opinion and in others. It's to explore what we can co-create with these laws of nature that have always been there and always will. And that's the blossoming. That's the blossoming we are approaching. And what will we create? If it's from our hearts, we know it's not going to be more suffering. We know it's not going to be more cruelty or hurtful abuse. It's going to be better because our hearts are programmed for love.
You know, I want to share a story with you and the audience. I was fortunate enough, this is quite a few years back, to have met a couple, and this couple was on the show. It was a very strange kind of ways, kind of secured us in order for them to be on the show. They were actually in town, doing a, workshop on meditation and opening the heart. And their whole premise to this was that all life begins with the spark. And the spark is the first thing that actually builds when a child is created is the heart. That's the first thing that's created. And that is out of love. And it was an interesting concept. And of course, it went way deeper than that. I'm just giving you kind of the highlights. And I've been very blessed, and I tell people this for a lot, but I've been very blessed to have had such absolutely fabulous minds, and people, on my show, you included amongst that. Of course, Robert, you're just wonderful. That it is no accident that I'm here, doing this show. It's not a coincidence. It was kind of like a divine thing for me, all of this happening. And it happened many years ago, 15 years ago I've been on the air. So it's been a while. And I have just been I feel just so blessed and so fortunate to have run across people that have just, have expressed themselves verbally, enough so that not only did I understand, but also certainly the audience, and it's transformed people's lives. And I think this is just, I just have to mention that those people. And I wish I could remember their names. I'm just terrible with names. Isn't that, that should be awful considering the business I'm in.
You know why you're terrible with names, and many of your listeners can relate to this. It's because we know we're so much more than our names are useful to identify us. It's good.
Yeah.
Rebecca, that's your name. But it's like a molecule compared to the universe with who we are. That's, I think, one of the reasons we forget things like that. But because we're now attuning to something much greater than our particular
identities.
Identities is the word I was looking for. Yes.
Well, I kind of feel this way. I may forget your name, but if you ever spoke to me, I'd go, I know that person. And it would click back in because it's the energy behind the voice. It's, that was one of the subtleties they taught me was everybody has an original energy signature.
Isn't that beautiful? You're absolutely right. They're in this oneness. Sorry, did I interrupt you, Rebecca?
No, not at all.
Okay. In this oneness, in this unified reality, there is no two snowflakes alike. There are no two cells that are alike. How did the Creator gods, how did she do this? It is way beyond the human intellect to be able to create this massive universe with no two things exactly alike. And yet, it's still unified. And I remember reading in high school about some of those old Greek philosophers, and they somehow were cognizing this concept of unity in diversity, and that's where the word university came from. And of course, it's been the true value of that word, unity in diversity, university, has been lost because now you go to the universities, and if you're in the music department, it has nothing to do with chemistry. You're in the chemistry department, it has nothing to do with English, whatever. But they had it, and I thought, university, that's who we are. We're diverse. We have our individualities, and each individual expression of the divine has its location within the whole. I remember when Jing was showing me around the backyard. Jing, my dude friend, the little nature spirit.
The little dude.
The little dude. One day it was raining and there was this beautiful rainbow. And he was so excited. I dug a big hole too, which is another interesting thing I did. Really big. I mean, like 6 foot deep, and I would go down there and just lay there. But he got me out of my hole because it was raining, and he showed me this rainbow, and he was so excited. I could see the 7 colors of the rainbow. And it wasn't the first time I had seen a rainbow. It's always beautiful. How many of us don't like looking at rainbows? I mean, give me a break,
and everybody remarks on it, right? Yeah.
It's beautiful. Now he was making 2 points, and many times, during my childhood, he was asking, where did that rainbow come from? And I said, well, it came from the rain and the sun. And he said, no, the rainbow was always there. It just was invisible until the right conditions from the sunlight and the rain happened. It's not that the sun and the rain created the rainbow. It just allowed consciousness to diversify itself in these 7 wonderful colors. And to prove his point, the next time my mom had the sprinkler in the backyard, he brought me to that position where the sprinkler was creating a rainbow. You know, you could see these little rainbows in the sprinklers.
Yeah.
And he said, see, it is something that is always there. Those 7 colors. And by the way, it used to be 5 colors before humans evolved to the point where they could see blue and violet. Now we're evolving. So there's multi-layers here. It's we've all seen rainbows. We all are in awe of rainbows. First of all, the frequencies are the very frequencies of ourselves. They correspond to the 7 chakras. They correspond to our DNA, our very essence. So when we look at a rainbow, we don't have to decide whether it's beautiful or not because we're looking at ourselves. We're looking at reflections of ourselves. When we are looking at a beautiful scene in nature, we're not raising our hands. How many people think this is beautiful and how many don't? Maybe there's some different opinions. But we all recognize ourselves. That's the definition of beauty. If we are seeing a aspect of our own selves, sunsets are also like this. When the sun just hits the horizon, and I used to live in La Jolla, and everybody would go down there, and it's like a ritual. Humans love looking at the sunset. Why? Because the ratio of the top of the sun and the bottom of the sun and the circumference of the way the sun looks when it hits the horizon those are geometries that our own DNA are made from. And our own cells are grown from. Those are information fields. So when we look at a sunset or a rainbow, we are actually resonating with ourselves. It's one of the secrets that Jing taught me as a child and which I still appreciate. It is, we are nature. We are growing in consciousness. And the more our consciousness grows, now this is the path, this is the season of the heart. Poets have known it for so long. When the poet says, oh, my dear, I love you with all my, he doesn't say, I love you with all my brain. I love
True.
I just so love you with every need that I have, or every, corpuscle, whatever I'm trying to say. We've always innately know that the highest form of our love is not from our brain, but from our hearts. We've always intuitively known that. It just fits the poetry. It fits our inner knowledge. And now there are organizations that have actually, like HeartMath and others, that have actually seen that the heart organ, the physical heart, contains more information and more power than the brain itself or other organs. So that is another symptom that we're approaching an age of the heart, approaching an awakening of consciousness, because not only do we feel it poetically, we feel it just in our own souls that the heart is the center of our highest aspect of love, not our brains, but we also are now getting scientific evidence of the strength of these heart fields that go out and affect everyone. Isn't it wonderful?
Well, seriously, you were talking a little bit earlier and you were sharing some stories, and I have to tell you and it seems to be happening more and more recently, or more and more frequently rather for me, is that when I listen to some of the guests and I know that they're in their heart, I get an emotional response within my own body. It's just like a welling up of emotions. And of course, sometimes that makes you cry, but that's not a negative thing at all. It's just an expression of the emotions coming out. And so several times you speaking here tonight that's happened. And I just wanted to share that with you because I find it, again, another fascinating change. And not that it hasn't always happened. It's just happening to me with a lot of frequency. And I've known some other people that it too has been happening to. So again, it's indicative of whatever's coming forward. And I do believe it's going to be something fantastic. We will be taking a break here in just a little bit, Robert. I would like when we come back, after our commercial break here, in a little bit, is to maybe have you get into, some of the 108, you talk about, geometry and things like that. Fractals. I've had some fractal things come in and that was just kind of a really odd experience. And we'll get into some of the physics aspect of it as well, because I have a lot of really scientific brains that are listening in, and I think they would enjoy that. And I think I hear the music. So what we're going to do, Robert, is we're going to take a break. We'll be back at the top of the hour. So all of you, please do stay tuned, bring your questions, keep them in all caps, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everyone. Love is the power. Robert Williams is our guest tonight. This has just been, the first hour just flew by, and it was just filled with so much fantastic information. I know you're not going to be disappointed in this second hour either. As a reminder, if you have questions that you would like to ask, please put them in all caps in the chat room so that we can get those questions answered for you tonight while we're on the show, while we still have Robert with us. And Robert, welcome back.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
So, okay, I've got like 72 thoughts. Let me see if I can get them out in a stream where they like are, somewhat, coherent here. I want to jump back a little bit, when we were talking about, connecting the dot from what's coming forward to, the information of your information in what was put into the book, The Raising of Consciousness. I kind of want to hit on that for a second before we get into the more technical aspects of this. I believe everything is kind of cyclic in nature to begin with. I believe we've probably had some times on this planet where, we may have been, different than how what I would call our recent history, what we think is our recent history, has kind of shown us to be. I believe this planet I think we're all here on this planet because we're here as an expression of everything that we have been up to this point. We're all here to be a part of this change. Some won't make it to the change, and then there's others that are coming in that are they will come into a world that you and I did not come into. It will be different, and it will be better, but it will be different. So I want to address some concerns that some people have shared with me. And some of those concerns are, oh my gosh, are you aware of all the violence and all the hate and all of this and all of that going on, and the bombings and again, I think you stated it very, very well, that it's a symptom of, I think you called it a bridge of, bridging from one space to the other. And as in anything that's changed, there's chaos and confusion. And some people, and this is not a negative statement at all, some people aren't equipped to handle change. They don't resonate. The energies almost feel, negative to them. And they certainly maybe don't even feel the energies, but it's just their reaction to it. It happens no matter if you're aware or not aware, if that's making sense. So yeah. I think I'd like to let people understand that that this is really a symptom. It's indicative of anytime there's been some kind of a change on this planet. Would you agree with any of what I've said?
Yeah, of course. So there's one of the most important topics, and that is the suffering on the planet and the terrible things we're doing to the earth, we're doing as humanity, and all of that. You know, after my near-death experience and after I was able to go in and out of the different dimensions, I became even more attuned to that reality than prior, and I feel it all the time. So how am I able to cope? We can get to that, but just to answer that question, it is so blatant that we as a humanity can do better. It is because we just know it. We just know it. If we experience suffering firsthand, we know it's not programmed that way forever. We just know it. And so the people that are behind those catastrophes and the abuse and the terrible things, for one, they're not aware, first of all. So they're just caught into a cycle of action and reaction, action and reaction, action and reaction. And it's based in the times long prior where we were threatened all the time in our little cave or in our little, the tigers were really there going to eat our babies if we weren't watching. We have already gone through that phase. And so this is a level of ignorance that is still prevalent on the planet. But what we have is a model of transition that we see in nature, and we see symptoms of the transition every day. And so as we are certainly aware, we're not hiding our head in the sand of the terrible things that are happening right this moment, we are also responding to something that is given to us in each moment as we, on the other side of our grief, on the other side of our despair and our individual confusion, or when we feel loss and when we see terrible things, on the other side of that, as we accept those emotions and accept that pain, like I said earlier, on the other side is this new dawn that is in process. And whether we believe it or not, it is in process. It is a condition of the planet. It is a law of nature that humanity and all of life and the earth itself is responding to. And that's where I can start talking about these codes, but just as to really own this current time collectively, the horrible things we know is happening and what is being on the airways and the news and all that. In addition to that, there is something that we can put our attention on. The first step is becoming aware that we have emotions, that we are experiencing pain and suffering and happy times and ecstasy, if you will. There is something even more basic. There's something even more fundamental, and that comes through our heart and embraces those polarities, embraces the good days and the bad days, the pain and the joy and the death and the life. There is something even prior to those polarities that is blossoming. It is coming out of the invisible matrix of creation, just like the flower never showed itself up until that point. It didn't look anything like the flower and the seed and there's other examples, the caterpillar and the butterfly. So humanity is going through that transformation, and we will resist the transformation. That's part of the system. So the caterpillar's nervous system resists its transformation transformation into the butterfly. It will actually fight nature at first and say, I don't want to change this great life as a caterpillar crawling around. This is, again, an actual thing. The nervous system of the caterpillar resists the change that is inevitable. And then the very cells of the nervous system that have resisted and fought to keep me, the meanness, and you, the you-ness, and have a big gate in between or something, those very cells then transform they have no other choice, just like I did, and many of us. They have no other choice but to let go to a higher informational field that creates the chrysalis, that creates the butterfly. So humanity is on that bridge. It's right somewhere in the chrysalis. It's somewhere in knowing that the previous paradigms are not quite it, because there's way too much suffering and there's way too much pain and abuse. So we have this higher intuition that keeps us going, that many times brings me to tears because of the persistence of those who haven't given up. And even those who have given up, those who have submitted themselves to unreasonable hardship, they keep on going, and they even in that state of I give up, they actually will help themselves if they see how to do that, or will help others if they're hurting. And that to me is the most beautiful and profound thing in the entire universe. And that is from the heart. It is a quality of love. And that is my suggestion to other humans and to your audience, is that in addition to our awareness of the cruelty and suffering, in addition to that, we add our awareness that we are even greater in this moment than that which we are resisting or reacting to. We don't negate anything. We just expand, and we start to feel we might even feel a chill or something that brings some kind of emotional, inspirational energy that brings us to the next breath and the next breath and the next breath. And that is what's happening in a global sense. Even those people that we don't know who they are, that seem to be causing these terrible things, even they, when they go through their transitions of consciousness from sleep state to waking state to dream state, I know it because let me just say, I believe it. Even those folks, those really bad people, they're having these callings, these intuitive promptings. They just don't know how to react to that because it's threatening. Nature will work all of this out. Nature will work it all out because the caterpillar is destined to become the butterfly, and humans are destined to ascend to this higher state of reality.
So let me ask you a question, because it comes up in conversation quite a few times. There are people who subscribe to the idea that the shift, and we'll call it the shift, that comes in, is that all of those that are accepting of this shift or are enlightened, however you want to word that, will move into a higher state of awareness, a higher state of being. It will become the norm for them. But the other folks that did not, it's like they're calling it like Earth 2.0, right? And I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to any of that. It's like a separation of those that didn't get with the program, so to speak, and those that did. What is your take on that? Or do you have one?
I've heard those. Yeah, I do. Those are appropriate thoughts in the scheme of things. These thoughts come and go to look at the reality of when the rose blossoms. A lot of those cells don't blossom into the actual rose petals. I mean, this is again the way nature works. A lot of them just come down and fly back down to the earth, or drop down the stem and go back into the earth. So in the micro sense, yes, not all of the rose cells become the rose blossom. Some of them go back to the earth. So it is a logical assumption that we can say not all human beings will make it. But that's also, let's be careful with that analysis, because we're now judging which cells are going to make it and which are not. And that's not really up to us, because, you know, if we knew how to actually transform ourselves, just with our own knowledge in our minds, we would have probably done it a while back. But we're part of a holistic process. Yeah, we're part of a holistic process that is full of mysteries, that is full of paradoxes, that is full of things that will confuse us. And it is a humbling reality, or a humbling realization, that's the word, humbling realization. And also it's a kind of a safe place to know that we don't have to figure out who's going to make it or who doesn't. And there is something greater that has the divine, you could say, the plan that will sort things out. I might die tomorrow, and there will be people that I love that will grieve my loss, and they won't be able to figure that out. And when I was younger, there was a death of a 7-year-old boy. Now, who can make sense of that? You know, there's nothing that makes sense. But in the holistic, there is no death, and that is, even though we have to honor the grief, we have to realize that this is not right. There is something that will reconcile those periods of history, and that reconciliation is right now a responsibility of attention. Where our attention is resting from moment to moment. How much attention are we giving to our minds that are replaying all kinds of things based in fear, pretty much, or how much of our attention is here now in this blossoming process that actually is serving from moment to moment our openness, our love, and the rest of it is some higher force that we trust in. And I actually think it's a good place to place our trust, because we could not figure this out on our own.
I agree. Well, thank you for answering that. Because I know that, you know, through the last few years, people have asked that question, and there's a lot of supposition on that. And I have to agree with, your statement. It was like, you know, I kind of figured that who's supposed to go will go, who isn't won't. And it's not my place to decide what path or not path, whatever you want to call it, that somebody should or should not be or do or become or what have you, that's not my thing. And that, you know, I might be one of those that don't make it. Who knows, right? I may not be here tomorrow like you, right? We just don't know. But I'm okay with it, because I know that the plan, so to speak, is bigger than all of us.
Exactly. And let us reassure, I believe there is some truth if we are living from our hearts and we are doing our best to avoid patterns that bring pain. Doing our best. I'm not saying we just stop, because patterns are patterns and they don't just boop and they're all gone, you know?
Yeah.
It takes moment by moment practice and persistence and forgiveness and love. There is something about that state of consciousness that I believe will join with other states of consciousness in a similar way, just like you and I are joining now, and we're resonating on a deeper level than just your name or my name and my bio and your bio. We're resonating, and your audience is too. There is something to say about that significant community that is happening now, and which I believe need to remain or need to be incarnated. the communities need to be human beings in their bodies, you know,
Right.
and with our differences and with our unified hearts that are part of this reorganization of energies on the planet. So I kind of wanted to add that the mysterious destiny includes human beings that are in their bodies, and if we're in our bodies from moment to moment, you know, then that's a sign that we can with our awareness, participate in each moment and have an effect. And if we're destined to die next week, then we will participate on another level. But here we are, we're in our bodies, and let's not worry about the other consequences of what we don't know from the future.
Exactly. So let's move into your quantum codes technology. That really kind of piqued my interest when with some of the breakthroughs in the field based technologies, the human potential, and also these codes. Now, these codes were given to you through like symbology, and then a meaning to that. Is it physics totally? What is it? Explain that so that the audience would understand, Robert.
The first time I saw them, they were symbols. They are symbols. The first time I saw them was in the clarity. The first time I saw them so clearly, let me start that sentence again. The first time I saw them so clearly was in the near-death experience in 1979. Let's talk about what a symbol is for a second.
Great.
Are you a musician, Rebecca?
No, I am not. My producer is. I've been around musicians, so I'm not like totally unfamiliar, but I am not a musician in and of myself, and don't ask me to sing. I'll make you cry, and not in a good way.
I might, though. All right. Let's say, though, that you saw a sheet of paper with music on it, with notes.
Right.
So even if you're not a musician, if you glanced at that, you'd see a symbol. It's called a treble clef. Then you see sharps and flats, and you'd see notes, and immediately you would say that's something to do with music, right? So you have that relationship to the symbol. The symbol is something to do with music. Now I am a musician, and so when I look at a sheet of music, I'm seeing symbols. There's the treble clef or the bass clef, and so now the musicians out in the audience. And now I'm seeing a C sharp, a whole note, a half note, an eighth note. So now these symbols are translating into something that I know means more than just music. It's a discrete kind of music. It's in a certain key, a certain, notes, sequence, a rhythm. And now I'm going to jump to Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, because he is a genius. And if anybody has researched the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson wrote all the great songs, and not that the others didn't help, and Mike Love contributed, but I was able to work with Brian, and I saw, now when he looked at music, he's got what's called perfect pitch. So when he looked at a symbol of treble clef, the 5 straight lines, and then the note C, he just didn't think, oh, that's music, that's treble clef, that's the note C. He actually just sang the note. He looked and sang. He was in that state of consciousness. And if I went over to the piano and I played the note C on the piano, he was singing in perfect pitch. There are others who have had that skill as well, that gift. So not only did Brian Wilson see music and hear it and sing it immediately, he was able to do just the opposite. He was able to see entire pieces of music, like Mozart, all at once, and then he would frantically try to write it down before he lost it. So let's back up. We're talking about symbols. There are symbols that have been found in Paleolithic caves, on cave walls. There are geometries in cave art. And a couple of those symbols are actually in everyday life today. So hundreds of thousands of years ago, some caveman or woman drew this symbol out of their consciousness. And if you do an analysis of the geometric relationships, the ratios in that symbol, it actually are contained in our own cells. These are sacred geometries, sacred mathematical relationships. They call them sacred because they don't end. They always have a angular relationship that is linked to the infinite. So remember, I don't want to get too technical, but we all remember we learned pi, right? Pi, the relationship of the circumference to the diameter of a circle is pi, right? So 3.14, but it goes off to infinity.
Right.
It goes off to infinity. There are ratios like that in ancient art and in modern art and in music and in our very cells and in the way the sun set that have these relationships to evolution. So what I saw was a bunch of symbols when I was coming back to my body. The symbols flashed before me, and when I got back into my body and cleaned up, my heart started beating, my breath started, I wrote down these symbols, and I began to research, because I thought, like you suggested, that they were given to me. In actuality, I just passed through a dimension, a domain that has these symbols. And the symbols are like notes on a paper. And when you're in a particular state of consciousness, the symbols are no longer needed. You actually are singing that song. And the music is secondary. So the mandalas that are in the Rig Veda, for instance, the Vedas is the ancient Hinduism, Sanskrit, and also in the ancient Taoism and the ancient Christian texts, I found them everywhere. These, let's just say they're symbols, or let's call them mandalas. A mandala is a circular piece of art that has certain geometric things within the circle or within that symmetric organization. So there's 108 of them. And in ancient Hinduism, prior to the word Hindu, when a devotee of God was meditating on a particular mandala, they would begin to nourish and open a certain chakra. It was a way in which they reference the proper relationship of the functioning of the chakra. That's where the mandalas came from. And then after that chakra was stable in that particular potential and functioning at its highest potential, the symbol was no longer needed. But the symbol activates energy, contains an energy source of information that is relevant to life. So these 108 symbols are now, many of them, not all of them, some of them have been active for a long time. They take the scope of all the chakras and all the functioning aspects of aliveness, of reality. And there's a symbol for the second energy center of the left side of our chakra. Gets very technical. That is able to discern whether a food is good for us or not, or good for our child or not. There's an information field exchanging information so that the mother or the father knows if this food is good or not. If that chakra is not working in its highest potential, then we have to learn the hard way, you know? There's also a set of symbols or mandalas that become active in this age we're in. It's the changing of the guard source of information from the individualized as opposed to another individual phase of human development to the phase of development that is in realization of unity, that is in realization that we are one thing with many faces, many waves on the ocean, but our essence is the ocean itself. Those symbols are now active. Those are it's like the monolith in 2001 that's been sitting there for hundreds of thousands of years and then goes off when evolution has reached its point. Remember that great scene in the movie where the cavemen evolved to the point where they understand that a bone can be used as a tool or a weapon.
Right.
So we are co-creating this reality on this planet. And so like the rainbow shows up when the environmental conditions are correct, and the rainbow shows up also when human consciousness has evolved to the point where we can even see those colors. So it is a mixture of the components of reality that find their right location so that the rainbow shows up, so that the consciousness can see those frequencies through the human eye and all the things that happen around that. It's very complex, but also very simple. It's a symbol of consciousness. So these 108 frequencies are about this age we're going into of the fully awakened human potential. And when I saw those symbols and realized that those tuning into those symbols healed my own body, literally healed my own body. I was the first experiment for this individuality. Then I realized that I had to find a way, or my motivation was to find a way to share this information with others. And then I found out, the Cherokees had it, and the Hindus had it, and the Sanskrit, and, and it's obvious in the work you're doing. It's just a different color of the same rainbow, or a different hue of the same color. We're all together in this. So the 108 frequencies were in my own healing, and then I did experiments with plants, and the plants grew more healthy. And it's been since 1979, and I worked with William Tiller at Stanford University, who taught crystallography. Very, very smart guy. And we developed a way to broadcast those very same symbols, those information fields, through the airwaves. And that gets into how that happens. Everything is a carrier wave for information. And so let me see if I can make sense of this, because Rebecca, I have a confession. When I was 19 years old, I was a DJ for KJAZ 93.7 on your FM dial for about 3 months. And I was on the air. This is Robert Williams, jazz across the bay. The reason why I bring that up is that the carrier wave was 93.7 megahertz. That's a frequency. 93.7 was the same all the time. You could tune in to 93.7, and then on top of that frequency was the modulations or the information of jazz music or my voice or the commercials or whatever else. That's what's happening right here and now too. So when I pick up my cell phone and call your cell phone, that's one carrier wave that connects you and me together via our cell phones. Now what we have found a way to do is to carry on those to apply on those carrier waves these 108 mandalas of higher consciousness. And so that was a breakthrough. We tested it, and we had Beverly Rubik, who's a biophysicist from the University of California at Berkeley. We had her test it for 2 years with people with the cell phone app, the Heart app. It's called the Heart Plus app, on their cell phones, and then people that had placebo, or the app that looked the same on your cell phone but didn't have these 108 mandalas. And double blind, she didn't know which was which, they didn't know which was which, and it was a very good study. And she found that those with the cell phone app, the Heart Plus app, with these 108 codes, their physical hearts actually strengthened. Their physical hearts. So the heart rate variability, which is a way that cardiologists look at the health of a human heart, increased. It was a breakthrough in science because we're using ancient frequencies, informational fields that have been around since the beginning of time into a person's life in their field, to see what effect those fields, those codes, those frequencies would have on their life. And what she found, what Dr. Rubik found, is that health improved and the heart started to beat more appropriately. And she measured the level of stress and found that stress dropped by about 30% compared to other things that were claiming to be anti-stressors. So, or neutralizing stress. So, wow, we're talking ancient codes through a cell phone, which has only been around for a decade or so, into a person's life right today, in 2015, the test was 16 and 17, with all of our stressors and our challenges and our conditions of turmoil and our conditions of happiness. Right now, these ancient fields are having a positive effect on a human being. And so that is what we presented. It's available. It's amazing because I jumped from these ancient things to like I'm, like a sales pitch. You can get it, you can get it on Apple, the App Store and Google and, or loveisthepower.com. It's a one-time fee of $1.95. See, there's my sales pitch. $1.95. And you get this app on your phone. You become part of the community. We're hoping that 1% of us can join in this way and have an effect on humanity, have a positive effect on humanity because that's the destiny and that's the blossoming time we're in. And that's our way of contributing to this already in process phenomenon.
So that was, wow. Okay. So on these 108 symbols, and I know you were working with people, did you ever put all those symbols, are they in a book form at all, or are they only available through a frequency in this app? Is there, maybe you can help with that a little bit? What do you think?
The symbols themselves are in libraries. You can go anywhere, look up, or on the internet, Google, just go in there and type in, mandalas, or, like the Sri Yantra, S-R-I, and then the new word Y-A-N-T-R-A. There's an example of a very powerful symbol, that Sri Yantra. So these symbols are not anything I came up with. My contribution, I suppose you could say, with the help of really smart people, was to get them to be broadcast through the airwaves. But the symbols are part of our own lives, part of our own consciousness.
Okay, so what I'm asking is that were these the symbols that you got were, and you found them throughout history, were they all the 108, either the mandalas or symbols together, or did you find some here and find some there? I guess that was probably would be more of my question.
I saw them all at once, and then I began to learn the significance of each symbol relative to each chakra, relative to the when the energies come down from the infinite into our souls and our soul groups, and then our souls and then our individual bodies, they come down and then they go into the fields, go into the earth, and they wrap around the core and they go back up, and then they come up our bodies. It's a very systematic mechanism, you could say, that a lot of acupuncturists know about, and Taoists, and so let me see. Yeah. I want to answer your question directly. I don't want to sound to your listeners like I'm skipping over, trying to hide something. So, but it is a little tricky because I was able to see and able to read that there are particular symbols for each chakra for the next highest level of potential, the next highest, we're not stagnant. We're like the caterpillar going on to evolve to something greater than that state. So these symbols are relative to the 7 chakras. There's more symbols. Now here's something I can share. There are more mandalas, specific mandalas, on the feminine side, the so-called feminine side of each of us. I'm not talking gender. I'm talking the energies that come down. There's ancients call it the masculine side, the feminine side, the negative side, the positive side. These are polarities that we mentioned earlier. So the feminine quality in a lot of the religions, they talk about the new return of the goddess.
Right.
Return of the goddess. The goddess as opposed to the god, right? So there is a feminine attribute given to the goddess, and there's a and talking about mother's love, okay? So the feminine goddess of Saraswati in ancient Hinduism or the Vedas is the goddess that comes when it's time. And she takes the place of the feminine goddess Kali, which has her place in time. These are symbols, you know? So when you look at like a symbol of Saraswati, the goddess Saraswati, or the symbol of these iconographies of Kali, or in other, Archangel Michael versus the devil, and there's symbologies in all the different religions. We remember these are symbols. These are actually, they do manifest as conscious beings, but they are symbols along the way. So the symbol for Kali, the goddess Kali, was one where she's pissed off and she is just raising hell because she is preparing the way for a higher consciousness. And that's a long story behind why she was given that role. Then she transforms into Saraswati. And if you look at the goddess Saraswati, the symbol of her, she's quite happy, and she's playing a musical instrument. She's dancing, she's singing. She has a pot of gold. She has a book of wisdom. That's the iconography of Saraswati. And there are also mandalas, geometries that correspond with that kind of consciousness, the consciousness of free creativity and spirit, like we were talking about earlier, mother's love and kindness to each other without expecting anything in return. So those are the mandalas that are actually not equal right now. They're more on the feminine side of our heart chakra. And so that's why the intuition of the goddess returning, Mother Earth, is accurate. And the feminine quality, whether our gender is male or female, whether our identity is male or female or a combination of both, and we're going through all kinds of wonderful explorations of possibilities. But I'm talking fundamentally that kind of energy is one of love, one of the heart, and one of the essence of miracles, the essence of mass transformation, and also the solutions of these problems are part of that consciousness as well. So when Einstein would go out and he would play violin, this is literally what he did. When he'd come up to he couldn't figure out an equation, he would go out and play his violin and sing and be in his boat on a lake, and then the answers would come to him. Often that's what happens. So when we get into a joyous, more effortless place of consciousness, then boom, the solutions to these problems come, like what happened to me. And also, look at these terrible problems we have: air pollution, water pollution. Can we solve those problems at the same level of consciousness that created them? Common sense says no. That's why we're looking forward to raising consciousness, so that somebody somewhere says, oh my gosh, it's this combination of bacteria with this and that, and we're going to enter the oceans. And, I don't have the solutions for water pollution at this point, but I do know that if we're going to survive and we're going to thrive and we're going to have a new reality on this planet, it's going to be in a higher state of consciousness, not this one that has been full of, let's just say, other things.
Yeah, I like that. Other things works.
Yeah.
That was beyond a fabulous explanation, by the way, of the 108 symbols and how you connected all of that. Just like we were talking about names earlier, I may not remember your name, but I will remember your voice, because within everything, I don't care what it is, it has a vibrational quality to it, a resonance, a field, and it's there. It's the unexplainable for a lot of people. It's certainly not seeable for most people, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We can all, I don't care there hasn't been anybody that I've ever met that wouldn't make some kind of a statement like, I could feel the energy in the room. My energy is low today. the crowd had an angry feel to it, whatever the verbiage is. But there isn't anybody that doesn't express himself at some point in time with that terminology. And that's what they're talking about, is something that they can feel or sense or they know, but they can't certainly show you what it is because it is not something that is seeable. It's not in our physical reality, but it is real and it does exist.
Absolutely. And that's an example I give to some folks who don't believe in anything else besides what's going on in their five senses. And I understand that level of understanding. But then I say, wait a minute. Have you ever been to a concert, like, just a music, like, let's say the Beach Boys, or let's say Peter Gabriel or something? Have you ever been to a concert? Oh, yeah, I've been to a concert. Have you ever had that feeling like, whoa, there's something else going on here? And this high vibe we get, that, this great feeling, in the concert. Like, oh yeah, I remember that. I've had that experience. But then I think, well, wait a minute now. If you're just saying our lives or our state of being is only responding to our five senses, let's analyze that concert. Is it the B flat major seventh going to the C minor that then goes to and then the drummer plays a certain thing? Those are the carrier waves. Those are carrier waves. The acoustic frequencies of the music itself carries the consciousness of the musicians, the audience, the ticket sellers, the security people. And I've had the joy of being in a Beach Boy concert and I knew that it didn't happen all the time. It wasn't just because we were playing good vibrations. It didn't automatically create that amazing feeling in the arena. But often it did. The musicians could feel it. We could feel it. And then the crowd, and then there was something that was more than the notes on the piano or the notes I was playing on the saxophone or Brian Wilson's voice or the audience and what they were doing. There was something greater. Now that's an example of a higher state of consciousness, a group context of a higher reality. And I bet you each person in that group during good vibrations or during whatever concert you went to, we weren't thinking, oh, wait a minute, is that guy over there, does he agree politically the same that I am agreeing with? Or wait, does he think in the same religious way? We were beyond that for those moments. And often the concerts would end and people would walk out of the arena. And it was order. There was less fear and more love. Music is one carrier wave of higher consciousness. Not every music, not all the time, but it can be. And so there's an example of something that is beyond the music on the sheet that we experience in these group situations. And that has power. And if we continue in those group communities, relating to each other, loving each other, being kind to each other, and helping each other when we forget or when we get afraid, that has power. That is love. And that's what we're doing here right now, Rebecca. That's what you're doing.
Well, I have to tell you, I've been quite moved by this whole conversation tonight, Robert. This has just been beyond fabulous, really. And I know I've said that a lot tonight, but I'm kind of stuck with trying to find some other word that's better than fabulous and not able to come up with it. So this really has been a really moving show, as well as an extremely informative show for a lot of the people. And those that weren't able to listen will be listening to this on the archives. And I hope that they go back and listen to it over and over, because as I'm viewing this, kind of rewinding the show in my own mind here, there were a lot of moments where that energy certainly went out and about, just your enthusiasm, your knowledge, your own vibrations. And I know it's touched a lot of people, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And this is magical. This is magical stuff here. That's what we're talking about. And magic is not elusive. We can create it. And you've just, brought it into a point where people can really relate to it. And that's just an awesome thing. We will be running out of time here shortly. So I don't want to lose sight of the ability to let you tell people, where to get the books, about the app, and any other books or information that you want to share. And then of course I'll let you give your thoughts to the audience before we actually leave tonight. So if you will, let us know how to get a hold of the books and the app and all that again, if you don't mind, and any websites that you might have.
Sure, Rebecca. Loveisthepower.com. Loveisthepower.com. Everybody knows that there's no spaces these days. So love is the power without spaces.com. You know? And I don't even have to say www anymore, right? So
that's right.
And you can get the book there. It actually links you to Amazon. You can download it on Kindle or get the actual book. Love is the Power is the name of the book. The app is also available on that website. Now, we're live right now, aren't we, Rebecca? So
absolutely.
I have to say that we just launched the app at the Apple Store and Google, and there's a little bug in it today. So, we apologize, but there's some technical thing. But probably within the next 24 hours, you can go onto the Apple Store and download the app, and join this community and have these vibes on your cell phone. And there's other information on the websites as well. And what I do want to end with, or it's your show, so you will, don't let me, but I do want to just end with a gratitude, because I'm also feeling you and your community here. This is a collective venture. We are now together. And if it wasn't, I might be the sprinkler, but this community here is the rainbow. The community that you've created and the communities that go out, like in all directions, and other communities that are resonating with you and your listeners and other communities like that. We're only 1 degree of separation now, maybe even less. So I might be the sprinkler or but the rainbow is who we are collectively. And the rainbow is a symbol of higher consciousness and a new reality where there will be less cruelty, there will be more kindness and more joy and more laughter and a happier time being a human. It's right upon us. And thank you, your listeners, because it's happening.
And wow, and honestly, where this is such an appropriate night, this was an eclipse, and we're going to have another one in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, how apropos, right? I mean, that's a hairbringer of change, of awareness, and people are very, very aware of the eclipses. We haven't lost that, that human, interest in things of that nature, because they're a rarity and we treasure them. And, so we're having these fabulous things going on this month, and we're all feeling this wave coming forward, and you have explained it in Love is the Power, and I will wait for 24 hours. I will be patient. I tried to do it this afternoon and I ran out of time. I'm going to download the app for myself. And I know that there's a lot of people that were already responding as well in the audience. So I think you're going to have a big success, and I wish you the greatest success in this, because we are, as I've always said, we're in this boat together. So,
Sure.
This is a good thing, right? I mean, we're all in the same boat together, and we're all collectively working towards the same goal, which is not only to make our own individual lives better, but certainly the lives of humanity, and to make this world and to mold it, I guess, or to make it look like how we know it should be or could be, which is a thing of beauty and peace and joy and love and, no poverty, no sickness, no illness, no greediness, no selfishness, all of those things, the time for that is done. I mean, I think we've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, the video, and I think it is time for these new energies for us to embrace them individually as well as collectively. And I'm looking forward to the 1%, Robert, because I do believe that if we're not there at that 1%, we're pretty darn close. Just from everything that I can see. How about you?
I agree, Rebecca. I totally agree.
Well, this has been just beyond fabulous. Is there, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, is there a way to do that, or do you even, do that kind of thing, Robert?
Oh no, I don't mind people getting, let's see, you can go, I have a Facebook, Robert.
Oh, good.
Williams. Yeah. There's a Facebook, so I'm available via that method. Let me think. I think there's a link on Love is the Power. That was part of the plan. Now, please accept my apologies because we are just launching. And so there's some technical things that are, how technology is. But I'll say over there, I don't mind. I love interacting with people. I'll help in any way I can. So it's not a link to my Facebook.
Well, we've run out of time. Robert, the music's playing, so I want to tell everyone, until we meet again, where will your life's journey lead you? Many blessings, everyone, and good night. Good night, Robert. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, JP.
Good night, everybody.